Good day, ladies and gentlemen. Today we'll be taking a look at the Resting Places, the latest entry into the Warhammer horror universe. Now this is an anthology, so instead of the usual format, I'll be going through each short story one by one. For the sake of brevity and to keep it spoiler light, I won't spend too much time on the details, but this should give you an idea of what topics are in the book and which stories might be worth your time. The first story in this anthology is Collapse by G.H. Archer. This story is about Navigator Gorst, who finds himself waking up on a dead spaceship with no clue of where he is or how he got there. Slowly throughout the story, it becomes clear to both him and the reader what happened as a demonic entity starts to peel his mind apart. I really enjoyed the way this novel slowly revealed the truth to us, with the demon eventually starting to influence the Navigator's memory more and more. On top of this, the short also introduces a very horrifying and unique concept of mental torture involving these memories later on into the story. I'm going with 4 to 5 stars rather than 5 because the ending is a bit disappointing. Next we have the Pharisine Paradox by Aras Wilt. Left alone on the watch station of the Ordo Chronos, this poor interrogator has no company except a bunch of brain-dead servitors. All of that changes when a mysterious ship translates out of the warp with Core set straight for his station. You can kinda see the ending of the story coming from a light year away, but still the story is very entertaining. There's some fun psychological elements of how the loneliness drives people mad, as well as some fun time-fucky shenanigans. Altogether, a decent story, 3 to 5 stars. We then take a detour to a haunted library in The Stacks by Chris Winterton. Here we follow a librarian on the search for an heretical tome that has been requested by the Inquisition. This library, however, is Imperium-sized and thus it is more akin to a dark labyrinthine city than a modern library. Basically, if you get lost or if your candle goes out, you will slowly starve to death in the dark. That in and of itself is already a very creepy premise that is only made creepier by the weird things our protagonist encounters along the way. These are however not really expanded upon much, which is unfortunate because this started to seem like a very cool horror mystery. The author instead keeps trying to convince the reader that the Inquisitor is really the thing we should be afraid of. In order to do so, he's turned into a Uber zealot that somehow is better at navigating the library than the librarians that live there. Yet, I really fail to see what is scary about this Inquisitor, nor does the zealotry get expanded upon. This interrogator just randomly kills everyone he encounters, and it seems for no good reason. Sure, our protagonist is kinda screwed, but that doesn't make it particularly scary. I'm going with 3 to 5 stars. King of Pigs by G.H. Archer also starts out with a very interesting premise as we follow a woman working at an imperial food breeding facility. Now this may already sound really creepy and interesting, but instead it is extremely grimdark. From animals being created in vats and only being hatched so they can be killed by hand, to supposedly creepy faces appearing on a pig, some things are so absurd they are borderline funny, while others are so nonsensical they make you facepalm. I like the opening with the meat mincer, but fail to enjoy pretty much anything beyond that, so 2 to 5 stars. The Somewhere Sister by Jeremy Lambert takes us to a haunted tavern in the dark corners of the mortal realms. Here we find an Ether Quartz addicted Lumineth who is trying to make a living after the disappearance of her sister and mother. I really like how this story utilized the Ether Quartz usage of the Lumineth as a horror element, taking this faction-specific piece of lore and expanding upon it until the end result becomes creepy as fuck. The only point of criticism I do have is that the story should have ended a bit earlier. It basically has an epilogue, but would have been much better with an open end. But still, I'm giving this one a solid 4 to 5 stars. The Gnarled Bob by Jamie Mystery Evans is also taking place in Age of Sigmar, but this time it is about a Sylvanet-obsessed landlord, or more specifically about a boy who has been adopted as part of his staff. I can say that the idea of Sylvanet being creepy murder trees is particularly original, and neither can I say that this is my favorite version of that. But the execution for the most part is solid. It has some fun SCP vibes once we get to see the Lord's collection, and the ending was particularly cool, even somewhat satisfying. So also 4 to 5 stars for this one. Pain Engine by Chris Thurston is about a Drakari homunculus who is trying to get his hands on a special pain engine. For this he enters into a conversation of sorts with the creator, during which he shares a story of how he got where he is now. First of all, I don't really get why this is in this anthology as it isn't scary whatsoever. Sure, there's a lot of gore because it is Drakari obviously, but that's about it. And even the gore is somewhat tame. The Bible books contained much more horrifying things, for an example. Outside of that, I also really didn't like it. The writing is overly verbose and pretentious, it constantly acts as if it contains some profound truths, while in reality there is very little information worth of note. You can write it in cursive all you want, it is still just nonsense. Hard to read, with very little plot, scariness or characters, getting a 1 star for me. Old Soldiers by Richard Strachan follows an, and you might have guessed it, old soldier from the cities of Sigmar. Plagued by mysterious ghosts that haunt him, you slowly learn who they are and why they stalk his nightmares. I enjoyed the mystery aspect of this, and it was nice to slowly see all the pieces fall together. However, the constant repetition of the same descriptions and scenarios was rather distracting. You don't need to tell me 20 times over how a room smells. Like 2 days later, I still know, and in which words it is described exactly as well. Going with 3 to 5 stars. The Vintage by David Annandale is about a survivor of a vampire attack who is put in charge of defending a keep that has been reclaimed by the Stormcast Eternals. I can't say that this is the most surprising Age of Sigmar short, and the name is a big spoiler, but if you're willing to look past that, it is a really creepy story that plays with a very interesting and terrifying concept. The Vintage puts us in the shoes of a character who has been haunted and tormented all of his life, only to find that his struggles may in the end never have amounted to anything. His realization in the end of the story is really fucked up. Solid concept, nice execution, 4 bloody stars. The Eisenbrag Horror by Darius Hinks is a weird one in the sense that it feels like an Age of Sigmar story or even a Warhammer fantasy story, but it is a 40k one, apparently. It is that it constantly talks about the God Emperor and Holy Terra, or I would be highly convinced it was actually a fantasy story. Regardless, the story itself is okay, the concept is cool, but there's too little build up or explanation to really care about what's going on. It feels like the final chapter of a novel you haven't read yet, which is a shame because if I cared about the group of conspirators in this story, this would be one hell of an ending. 3 to 5 creepy houses. Aberration by Jake Osga is an excellent sad gothic horror story about a girl who, after being accused of witchcraft, flees her village. She then stumbles upon a Varkas vampire, and we basically get a grimdark mixture of Dracula and Twilight, sprinkled with a bunch of cool Varkas lore. The story plays with the hollowness of the undead, the monster that hides behind the vampire's glamour, the fucked up beauty standards of Shaiish, and so much more. A 5-star story for sure. Can't wait till Jake Osgar writes an Age of Sigmar novel because so far he always manages to write excellent stuff. I'd say he's a bit of a weird blend between Robert Rath and Peter Fiavari, and that really is a major compliment. Blooddrinker by James Bugden is without a doubt my favorite story of the anthology, however, and that's all I'm going to say because it is very easily spoiled. The lore accuracy is maybe a bit iffy in this one, but by rule of cool, definitely 5 stars. Similar to the Somewhere Sister, Bird of Change by Richard Strachan does something I really like, which is exploring uncommon parts of the lore. In this short story, we follow a kid growing up in a Disciples of Tzeentch village. A village where mutations are seen as a blessing, and our normie protagonist would do anything to become as blessed as his peers. Imagine a screwed up Deku from My Hero Academia. Without spoiling too much, this story is split into 2 segments, and this first Tzeentchian half was amazing. Lots of cool world building, fun character interactions, and a horrific ending, deserving of the Warhammer Horror title. The second part, however, is just really boring, and completely removes everything that made the first half so good. 5 stars if you read until the 3 part, 3 stars if you read beyond that. So altogether, resting places, should you get it? Well, I would say that there are 2 instances in which you should. First of all, since the Age of Sigmar stories here are on average scarier, more original and more creative than the 40k ones, I would recommend it more for people who dabble in the mortal realms than 40k Puritans. The second thing is that half of these stories are about vampires, so if you like your canine sharp and bloody, then this is the anthology for you. The awkward thing with these anthologies is that there's just a couple of stories, such as Blooddrinker and Aberration, that I would highly recommend, but then also a bunch that are less amazing. Of course, you could also consider buying them separately, but with how comparatively cheap the full book is, you might as well just buy the entire book. Anyways, in short, read it if you like Lumineth, Sylvaneth, Tzeentch or vampires.
If you like this video, please consider subscribing and click ringing the bell to appease the Great Horned Rat. For more lore content, please check my main channel and leave any book recommendations in the comments down below. I gotta get back to reading the next book.